Hey guys, welcome to another video. My name is Ian, I'm Ian the Reader, and today we have another year-end video for you. This time, my 2021 honorable mentions, so that's exciting. So, I am being a little bit reckless with doing this list now. I say that. Other people are like posting their honorable mentions and their top 10s and things like that, and that's fine, that's great. But for me personally, I like to use every single day of the year to find my favorite books. I talked about this a little bit in my December TBR video, but I have been reading some fantastic books this month so far, and to be honest, like a lot of these are honorable mentions, but I don't necessarily know that they'll be all of my honorable mentions because I have like my current top 10 mapped out. And as of today, as of filming, it is December 29th. So there's only 2 other days besides today left in the year. That being said, I just finished a book yesterday that's gonna be on my top 10, and I'm in the process of reading another book that could be on my top 10 because my December TBR did not come to play. It is insane. So what I'm trying to say is, this is my honorable mentions of 2021. However, if things change around a little bit with my last book or two of the year, in my top 10 of 2021, I may have to also mention an honorable mention or two that were originally in my top 10 or that I hadn't read yet. That's all. That's all I'm trying to say. I did want to quickly say that these are in absolutely no particular order. To be honest, some of these were 4.5-star books, some of these were 5-star books. A couple of them, when I read them, were 4-star books, but they've just stuck with me so much that I had to include them in my 10 honorable mentions. And honestly, it's kind of surprising how that works out because there are some books that I rated 4.5 stars, maybe even 5, that are not on my honorable mentions or on my top 10 of the year. They just haven't stuck with me in my memory because I feel like with a lot of books, you know, they can be really great when you're reading them, but I feel the true test of a book is how it impacts you in the long term, and so it's just really interesting to see how that changes throughout the year, isn't it? But anyway, without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into my 10 honorable mentions for 2021. The first book I wanted to talk about is one that I read back in November, and that is The Guest List by Lucy Foley. If you haven't seen it yet, I did a reading vlog last month where I tried out 3 thriller authors that are buzzy that I had not tried yet, and Lucy Foley was one of the 3 authors, and my goodness, did I have a good time with this book. To be honest, like, I wasn't sure how it was gonna feel. It definitely had a lot of hype around it, but I had also seen some people not enjoy The Guest List as much, and so I went in kind of with, you know, expectations that were a little bit reserved just because I didn't know where I was gonna fall on the Lucy Foley spectrum, and I had a blast. Like, honestly, this book is one of the most fun reading experiences that I've had this year because, yes, there was like the thrilling aspect of it, but the mystery behind like trying to figure out, okay, who is the person that died? Who has motivation to kill somebody here on this island? Like, trying to piece that all together and not having the reveal be to like right at the end was so nice. I loved that, to be honest. Yeah, it was just so much fun. If you don't already know what The Guest List is about, it takes place at a wedding that is on an island, which is kind of isolated. There's not really good cell reception or anything like that, and it's told from a lot of different perspectives. You get the bride, you get a groomsman, you get a +1, you get a lot of different people, and with that, there are 2 timelines. There's the main timeline of the time leading up to the wedding, so kind of like the day or 2 before it, and then there's the present timeline of a body has been found or a body was seen and now they're trying to find it because there's this big storm going on, blah, 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 and they don't know who has been killed, they just know somebody has been wounded mortally. And so, yeah, it was just really great getting to have that dual timeline and really building the suspense with this book. I had a blast with it, and I highly recommend that you see for yourself how you feel about it. Like I said, not everybody loves this book, but it's being talked about for a reason. This book is really great. Next up, I did want to briefly talk about 2 Stephen King books that did make my honorable mentions list, those being The Dark Half, which I read in like October, and The Green Mile, which I read back in like February or something like that. Now, a few things with this. The Dark Half, let's talk about that first. So The Dark Half is an incredibly underrated Stephen King book, to be honest. I never hear people really talking about it, and it was one that took me by surprise. I did not expect to love it as much as I did. I knew I was gonna have a good time, you know, because it's Stephen King, but to be honest, like, this is definitely like in my top half Stephen King for sure, maybe even like my top 3rd, and it was just a really good time. So The Dark Half follows a man whose name I can't remember right now, and it's kind of inspired by Stephen King's process of being outed as Richard Bachman. If you don't know, Stephen King writes under his own name, but for a time he also wrote other names under the pseudonym Richard Bachman. And in this novel, he kind of grapples with the same situation that he went through in real life, in that his main character is an author who has written books under a pseudonym, and somebody finds out and basically tries to blackmail him and say like, oh, if you don't give me all this money, then I'm gonna tell the media that you're actually this author. And in the book, he's just like, okay, whatever. And so he just outs himself, and they do like this big article about how George Stark is the name of the author, like the pseudonym, and they're like, George Stark is dead or whatever, and they do like a photo shoot at a gravesite and stuff like that, and they kind of make a joke of it just for publicity. But then the pseudonym comes to life and starts killing people. So it is pretty wild. Honestly, I had such a good time with this book. Yeah, really just a great time. Like, I wouldn't say it's like a massively impactful Stephen King book by any means, but it's just a good time. Like, what else do you want from a Stephen King book? And The Green Mile. So with this one, when I read it, I was convinced that one, it was going to be one of my favorite Stephen King books of all time, and two, it was definitely going to make my year-end top list. The problem is, this book just didn't stick with me as much as I thought it was going to. So at the time of reading it, it was 5 stars. I loved it. I liked the characters and just the way the story progressed and things like that, but looking back on it, I can't remember a lot of it, you know? I remember, you know, bits and pieces and things like that, but it's one of those stories that just has not stuck with me as much as some of the other books that I've read, one by King and just by other authors this year. And so I definitely love this book. I definitely recommend it, but I only really feel comfortable putting it on my honorable mentions list rather than my top 10 list. Still a great book. If you don't know what this is about, it takes place on death row. It follows a man who works on death row and kind of his observations about the different patients, and a certain patient named John Coffey who is accused of a crime that is rather brutal, and I'm not going to tell you what goes on from there because it's kind of a spoiler, but yeah, it was very emotional, very powerful, but it just didn't stick with me as much as I wanted it to, so honorable mention, still good. Speaking of horror, I did want to quickly mention The Final Girl Support Group by Grady Hendrix. This book took me by surprise. Like, I didn't know, I had never read a Grady Hendrix book. This was my first one. And the reviews that I had seen and I have seen up to this point are kind of mixed, to be honest. Not spectacular by any means. It has like a 3.6 something on Goodreads, which is really shocking to me because this book was wild. It was crazy, it was gory, it was twisted, it was fun. It was just really out there. So this book follows a group of final girls who are the sole survivors of like massacres and things like that, and they have a support group. They just meet and talk and, you know, try to support each other. But at the start of the book, the support group is kind of breaking apart. It's not what it used to be and things like that. And the main character, Lynette, is really struggling. She is just like the most paranoid person in the world, with like, you know, great reason because she was a part of a terrible crime. But yeah, she's just struggling, and she starts to see things that may or may not be there, and ultimately the final girls start dying in mysterious ways, and so she's convinced that somebody's trying to kill all of them, and it goes from there. This is a great book. It really pays tribute to like classic horror tropes and things like that. It really does a spectacular job. I've said of this book that it does what Final Girls by Riley Sager should have done, and I stick by that. It was really good. Next up is the only classic that has made its way onto my honorable mentions list. I didn't read nearly as many classics as I wanted to this year, and I hope not nearly as many classics as I'm going to read next year because I do have big plans for 2022, but Stoner by John Williams was one that I did read this year and that did definitely leave a mark on me. This book was a bummer, like, to be honest. Like, I read it and even reflecting on it, you know, it was just kind of sad, but not in like a tragic kind of way, more in like the everyday tragedy, I guess, which is almost darker in a way. It just follows a man named, his last name is Stoner. I believe his name is it William Stoner? I can't remember what his first name is, but he is an English professor, and it follows his whole life. It starts out with him as a young man and going off to college, not really knowing what he wants out of himself and kind of discovering his interests and the things that he's passionate about, and it goes throughout his whole life. Like, it literally covers, you know, from start to end of his existence. And It was very melancholy. It very much has to do with kind of the impact that people leave on the people around them, and the disappointments of life, the struggles of, you know, trying to balance your hopes and dreams with reality. And I feel like there's so much that can be said about this book, but I'm just not smart enough to say it. So go watch some videos on this book. It's definitely worth reading. It was a really amazing experience, but oh, I'm sad. Speaking of sad, this book that I'm about to talk about messed me up, and that is Together We Will Go by J. Michael Straczynski. I think that's how you say his name. Oh man, this book has just about every trigger warning that you can think of, to be honest. It is, oh man. Okay, so this book follows a group of people who meet in an online forum, and basically it is, they have all decided that they no longer want to live for various reasons. All of them have decided that they want to end their lives, and so rather than just, you know, doing other things to complete that process, they decide to have one last crazy go around. And so what they do is one of them rents a tour bus and they take this giant road trip across America, and it is going to end with them driving that tour bus off of a cliff. Yeah, and this book is exactly that. You get a lot of different perspectives. Each character on the bus, I believe, has their own perspective, because what the person who's organizing it does is he wants to kind of gather all the information, and so he makes every person like do journal entries, also just to make sure that they really want to do this, you know, to really think about whether or not this is what they want and things like that. And so they have to do like little journal entries throughout their time on the bus, and so you get all of those different perspectives. And this book was everything, honestly. I gave it, I think, a 4-star when I read it, but it has just left such a mark on me because it captures so much of what it means to be human. It captures the fear, it captures the insecurity, it captures the beauty, the love, the struggle, the pain, everything. And it's truly remarkable what this story accomplishes. There were a lot of moments in this book that made me laugh. There were a lot of moments in this book that made me want to cry. It's just a really powerful read. I can't believe not more people are talking about this book. Maybe it's just because of how controversial the topic of it is. But at the same time, I think it's something that people need to talk about. You know, I think it's something that is worth a conversation. And so if you are not too sensitive to things like that, maybe give this book a go, because it really left a mark on me, and I really am glad that I read it this year. All right, let's go a little bit of a different direction. Next, I did want to talk about Falling by T.J. Newman. This was a thriller that I read earlier this year, and I picked it up on a whim. I got a proof for it on NetGalley, and I zoomed through this. This was one of those stay up till 2 in the morning to finish the books, because once it took off, oh my gosh, I could not put this book down. So this book follows a variety of characters, but the premise of this book is that there is a man who is a pilot, and when he is about to take off, he basically receives this video email, and he opens it to find that somebody has kidnapped his family and attached bombs to them, and if he doesn't crash the plane that he's flying, then he's going to kill the family. And it goes from there, and this book is insane. Like the thrilling non-stop pace of this book is just unbelievable. Like from the get-go, things just zoom and they do not stop until the end. It was one of those books that had my heart racing, had me like biting my fingernails practically, and yeah, it was just a wild ride. If you're looking for a book to maybe get you out of a reading slump, or a book that's just gonna be really hard to put down, or a book that you're just gonna have a really good time with, I highly recommend Falling by T.J. Newman. So good. All right, we have 3 books left to talk about. First up, we're going to talk about The Gargoyle by Andrew Davidson. Yeah, so this is a book that I read for another reading vlog. I'll go ahead and link that one as well. It was my blind date with a book reading vlog, and it's really cool that one of the books that I read in that is making one of my year-end lists. So that was a video where I basically randomly found some books at bookstores that I had never heard about, and then I didn't look up any synopsis of, I didn't look up any reviews for, I just went for it and I read it, and The Gargoyle was one of those, and I had a really great time with this book. This book follows a man who is unnamed, actually, and I didn't really realize that until about halfway through. But essentially, at the very beginning of the book, he is in a terrible, terrible car crash. He's horribly disfigured. He loses a lot of mobility. He loses fingers. He loses other body parts that I won't talk about. And he's horribly scarred and things like that. And he relied upon his looks and his mobility for his career and just for his life and things like that. And so he really falls so hard. And in this book, it's about his path to redemption. It's about his path to recovery. But then in addition to that, there's this woman that comes into his life while he's recovering in the hospital who says that they have known each other for hundreds of years and that they are connected throughout time. And it digs into this story that she has to tell him. And it is a really beautiful book. It's a really amazing book. It could be a little gut-wrenching at times in the descriptions of what this man went through, but it was really amazing the way the author balanced like contemporary fiction with historical fiction, because the female character's story, goes back hundreds of years, and so it really sets the scene through a lot of different stages of history and talks about a lot of different people that she supposedly came into contact with, and it was just a really amazing story. It was like a tapestry, honestly, just seeing all the different parts of it and just getting to experience so much in one book. I had a really great time with it, and it was definitely worth the read. Second to last book is Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro. I think that's how you say the name. I'm not 100% sure, but this book I read way back in January, and it was emotional, to be honest. Like, it was one of those books that isn't so much about plot as much as it is about how it makes you feel and what it brings to your mind and what it means to you. I really can't even very well describe what this book is about. There are certain aspects of it that are spoilery, so I don't want to get into that, but it does follow a group of friends as they grow up and as they experience what it's like to live, what it's like to love, what it's like to look back on your past and have regrets and have things that you remember fondly. It's really about nostalgia. It's about love and what it really means and the power of it or the lack thereof. And yeah, it's just a very impactful read. It is something that has brought not necessarily thoughts to my mind as much as feelings over the past year. And I'm glad that it's one that I read at the beginning of the year because it's given me these last 12 months to really reflect on it. And I feel ready, honestly, to come back to it. There is a film adaptation with Andrew Garfield and Keira Knightley and I think Carey Mulligan that I would like to watch, and I feel ready to do that now. But if you've read this book, please let me know what you thought about it in the comments, because I haven't really talked to anybody about this book and I thought it was really amazing. And the last book that I did want to talk about is one that was on my top 10 list until yesterday, and I actually read this book this month as well in December. And so guys, my top 10s have been changing like crazy this month. You're gonna be surprised by how many books are from December, and that's why, like, honestly, I love utilizing every single day of the year, because you never know when you're gonna find another favorite. But anyway, the last book on my honorable mentions is Malibu Rising by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This is a book that was featured in my Book of the Year reading vlog that I just posted last week. I'll go ahead and link that one as well. And it was a book that I did not expect to love the way that I did. I have never read any other Taylor Jenkins Reid books. This was my first, and it was one of those things where I just wasn't necessarily sure that this author was for me based on what I'd heard about her other books and things like that. I just wasn't convinced that she was going to be my style, but in the end I decided to pick her up for this reading vlog, and I'm so glad I did, because I feel now very excited to pick up her other books like Daisy Jones and the Six and The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo or something like that. I'm very excited to try those books, and I wasn't before, and Malibu Rising is to blame for all of that. So this book follows a group of siblings, 4 siblings, who are living in California, and they both have some level of celebrity. Some of them are surfers, one of them's a model, and well, all of them surf, but they all have different levels of celebrity. And so it focuses on a party that they throw every single year, and this year they're throwing the biggest party yet, and things change with the party. But it's a lot more than that, because that premise alone did not sell me on it, but it's really told in 2 timelines. So there's that timeline, and then there's the past, the story of their parents, how they met and fell in love, and the story of the kids growing up and being in that household and how it affected them as individuals as well as part of a family and things like that. And that's what really works with this story, is not the glamour of it, because that is there and that's not what really appeals to me in books. It's the family dynamics and the character growth and things like that. You get to witness these characters go through so much. And it's always amazing to me when a book is not particularly long, but it covers such a great period of time, and you get to see characters grow and change and go through a lot in the short amount of time you have. And Taylor Jenkins Reid just does a fantastic job with these characters. She does so well with her pacing and the balancing of the 2 timelines. It felt very seamless, and it was a book that I was immediately immersed in, which is not always easy to do, to be honest. So yeah, I had a really great time with this book, and I am very much looking forward to reading other books by Taylor Jenkins Reid in the near future. But that is it for my honorable mentions of 2021. It was such a good reading year, you guys. I'm so excited to dig into my top 10. That's the crazy part. Like, all these books I could go on forever about. I loved them, and these are not even my top 10 books. So I had to make an honorable mentions video. And there were like probably 5 or 6 books that I had to originally have on my list and then trim off just because I couldn't talk about like a billion books. But this was a great year of reading. I'm so excited to talk about my top 10. Keep an eye out for that video. It's definitely coming out in the next few days. And yeah, just so excited to see what 2022 has to offer. But thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure you like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, all that jazz. I post videos every Tuesday, every Friday, and sometimes on random other days just because I want to and I love you guys. So thank you so much for watching. Don't be a stranger, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!